Hey everyone, so here I am. We are at day 13, I think it is, of the 30 days ideas challenge. And you guys know, if you followed any of the other ones, that the whole ideas challenge came through to me. And the ideas, of course, is an acronym for, ideas and information, downloads, epiphanies, awarenesses, and stories that I want to share. So I thought we might talk about gut health because, Hippocrates, who is considered the father of Western medicine, as you know, doctors for many years took the Hippocratic Oath. And he was quoted, and he's always still to this very day quoted as saying, all disease begins in the gut. And, he was definitely on track, absolutely, because you can kind of see now there's so many different, very well-regarded cardiologists and neurologists, the Dr. Gundrys, David Perlmutters, people like that are coming out with their own books, they're coming out with their own research, they're coming out with their own products, including probiotics and prebiotics and things like that. And they realize that, hey, I'm a cardiologist, I'm a neurologist, but, I've really got to consider the gut. And I know with Dr. Gundry, that's what he'd sort of been quoted as saying that, even though he, performed so many bypass surgeries and things like that, he'd see the same ones come back. And I think that he realized I can't just keep patching people up. We've got to get to why this is happening in the first place. So that's why I just thought, I really want to talk about this. And I know I've struggled with digestive health issues over the years, and I think a lot of people have. And more they're finding that, there's definitely a link between, leaky gut, which is when that, intestinal lining becomes really gappy and permeable, and, a lot of different health conditions. And of course, when you think about the fact that, something like 80% of the immune cells are in the gut, and then, 90% of serotonin, our feel-good hormone, feel-good neurotransmitter, is produced in the gut. And, a lot of people these days are suffering from depression, anxiety, and insomnia and all of that. And, serotonin's a precursor as well to melatonin, the sleep hormone. So you can see, we've got to focus on the gut. So I'm going to talk about a few little things that you can consider, that you control, and that you need to be aware of. The first one, and some of these are things that you probably, but you're probably not necessarily doing. The first one is try and be present and mindful when you eat. And I know you've probably heard this before, but are you actually doing it? Are you actually doing it every day? Because I think if we're honest, most of us are not. Most of us are thinking about what we've got to do later in the day. Maybe we're thinking about what happened yesterday or even last month, or, that whole thing that I spoke about yesterday, the future living, the past living, which most of us are doing. Of course, when you're thinking about what you've got to do later, when you're thinking about what happened yesterday, and as they say, most of it's negative by nature and kind of a sense of urgency, can you kind of feel what that would be doing to your digestive system? Not great. As we know, a thought will have a physiological effect. So really, the more that you are present, it's going to help you in a lot of ways. It will encourage you to actually slow down. Because definitely, if you're eating, thinking about what you've got to do later, you're going to eat more quickly. Also, you're probably more likely to overeat. Because when you're eating more present, you're more mindful, you're taking your time, you won't eat as much. And I know this firsthand. This is someone who, hand on heart, I'm a fast person. You can probably hear by the pace that I speak at, and I walk fast, I do everything fast. I ate really fast for many years to my detriment. And, luckily, I've never had a weight issue, but, I would overeat and then I'd pay for it later. I would either feel, like just bloated and gassy and all those sort of things because I'd way overeaten. And it was because I was rushing and, I've got to do this later and da-da-da-da-da, and not great. So definitely be present. The other thing when you're present to what you're eating is you actually enjoy it more. You savor it more. You become more almost engaging of the senses, it becomes this more experience. So you taste, what can I taste? And the texture, the mouthfeel. So, I really encourage you, that's the first thing I want you to really start doing when you're eating, is being present. The second thing is, and it's very related, is chew your food really well. Because, you don't have to go and chew every single piece 50 times or whatever. Some people say 30, 50, 100. We don't have time, let's face it. but it's boring and you probably get a sore jaw if you're doing that all the time. But what I would say is just chew as much as you can. The stomach doesn't have teeth. That's what I say to people. So it's like chew your food really well. And when you start chewing, what happens is it's like it's sending signals, and you start, the gastric juices get ready. The enzymes start being sort of kick-started and produced. And as we know, we start actually breaking down carbs in the mouth through salivary amylase. So it's like you want to chew, so you actually start producing all these nice little juices and enzymes, and you break down your food properly and efficiently. So chew your food really well. Third thing is try and not drink liquids with your meals. And I know that's kind of weird because most people have been conditioned, what do you want to drink with that? Do you just want water? And people will say, you just have water with it. It's like, that's fine. But if you're eating and then you're just, drinking, it's like you dilute all those enzymes. You dilute them more and more and more, and then you wonder why you feel bloated and gassy and all the things later on. So, as we said, we're going to be present when we eat. We're going to chew the food really well. We're going to try and wait, say 20 minutes either side of your meal before you have a drink. I mean, you can have a little tiny sip if your mouth is dry, and some people need it because they don't have a lot of saliva. But don't have a full cup, just have a little bit and then wait, as I said, 20 minutes either side. The next one is really try and be mindful of your thoughts and your emotions when you're eating. And this does relate in with the rest of them, with number one in particular. But if you're kind of thinking, oh gosh, like I've got so much to do, like it's just too hard, or, you're listening to the news while you're eating and it's talking about all the cases of this particular variant all around the world, and it brings up this fear and, these emotions and these thoughts, as I said, they're having this physiological response. The body is always listening. It's like, I can't remember who was quoted as saying that, and I saw it on Facebook, but it was amazing. It was something along the lines of, the cells are always eavesdropping on all your conversations and your thoughts, and they really are. So, you've got to be conscious of the fact that you're having this thought, you're having this emotion, the body is listening, it will react. And as I said, you won't be digesting your food optimally. I mean, you have a fear thought, and if you go into fear, if you go into fight or flight energy, it shuts down the digestive system. So, it's best not to eat when you're scared, when you're fearful and all that sort of stuff, which I know can be hard because a lot of us live in fear, and sometimes we're not even aware of what the fears are. It's just like vague general fears about fears of change or the unknown or things like that. Or some of it is on a deep subconscious level. But the more that you can be present, mindful and aware of what these thoughts and emotions are when you're eating, you're less likely to get the indigestion and the bloating and the gas and all that sort of stuff. Next thing is breakfast. Let's talk breakfast. Best thing to do is ideally eat within 30 minutes, an hour maximum of waking up. The reason I say this is because what happens is your blood sugar will drop, and consequently, as your blood sugar drops, cortisol and stress hormones are released because the body's like, oh shit, quick, the blood sugar's dropping, we're going to do something. And so then you start to feel stressed, and that's not conducive to digesting your food optimally. As I said, it's like if the body thinks you've got to fight or flee, digestion is secondary. So it's like, you know what? I need all the energy to fight or flee this situation, so I'm going to shut down the digestive system because, you know what, sister, you're not going to eat because we need to fight or flee. So, ideally, as I said, you want to be eating within half an hour, maximum an hour. And ideally something lighter, like a smoothie or something. And you still want to have, the protein, of course. You still want to have a little bit of good fat, and you still want to have some sort of, carbs. So it could be that you put some spinach, provided that you're not a high histamine person. Maybe you just spinach. You might want to put a little bit of chia seeds or something for the fat. And of course that gives you various, a little bit of protein and stuff too, and the fiber and things like that as well. And then you might even want to put some collagen. Some of the collagens have 10 grams of protein and things like that. Or, there's various shakes that you can try in terms of like a vegan protein or whatever. Like fermented pea and rice or something if that suits you. And, you might want to put a little bit of coconut water or coconut milk or almond milk or whatever, works for you, but that's going to be less taxing in the digestive system, because if you think about it, you haven't eaten for say 8 hours, right? And then if you go and try and, consume bacon and eggs or whatever, that's pretty harsh in the digestive system, because it hasn't started to wake up. It doesn't have all the juices and everything ready to break it all down properly. The next thing is food combinations. Now, this is especially important if you have gut issues. Gut issues, I mean, ongoing bloating, gas, heartburn, indigestion, wind pain, all the things. So, and it could even be that you have an inflammatory bowel condition. But in terms of food combos, for instance, who doesn't love a good porridge with berries? I know I do. For many years I had that. Or, people will say that they have cereal with berries or banana or fruit or something. Not a great combo, the starch and the fruit. And there's other combinations that aren't great either. So typically you wouldn't really have a protein and a starch. And as I said, that kind of goes against what a lot of people would do, because, when you think about a typical kind of meal, and even when you think about what people have consumed in the past, like our grandparents and things like that, it might be, say, steak and potato and veggies or something like that. They're not a great combo, the protein and the starch. And, so, a protein and a veggie, like protein and a salad, so steak and salad will be fine, and then you could have some olive oil, some like extra virgin olive oil, and maybe some apple cider vinegar, or, a bit of Dijon mustard or whatever in the dressing. That's fine. Or you can have a starch and, like a veggie or something, so a non-starchy veggie. So that would kind of work. So that's kind of making sense. So, it'd be better to have, you're going to have pasta, you can have some veggies with that, some olive oil, things like that, but ideally not having beef with it. And I know, as I said, you're probably thinking, well, hang on, what about lasagna? What about spaghetti, bolognese, things like that? It's ideally not necessarily a great food combination. And also, you're not really meant to have fruit, because sometimes people will have it straight after a meal because they feel like something sweet. Yeah, okay, it might be better than having a chocolate bar. The problem with that is, it's like, just say, for instance, and I heard someone say this great example, or this analogy sort of thing. It's like, if you've got this beautiful Porsche, and it's like you're stuck behind this, B double or something. So it's like you're kind of trying to, brake, because you want to go, you've got a much greater speed capacity or capability than the B double truck, So it's like you're going to be kind of almost braking, because it's backing up. Like you're right there behind the B double trying to overtake, but you can't because there's other traffic. So, it's the same sort of thing. That fruit's sitting there. It's moved through very quickly. But, your body's trying to break down the steak and the potato or whatever else. So that's when you start to get bloated and gassy. So, that's what they say, particularly rock melon and melons and things like that. You should always have that on its own. And but then that can bring up blood sugar issues for people too. So it's one of those things, as I said, I always say to people, just working with your healthcare practitioner. Maybe you can do a bit of trial and error when it comes to food and diet, and seeing what works for you and what doesn't work. Because as we know, it's 40,000 different diets and eating plans out there, plus it's worked for that person. Maybe it's worked for a few other people that they've worked for, but you're unique. So you've got to try and really, try these things on for size. See what works for you. Next one. I would consider functional labs if you have chronic persistent issues, longer than even say 6 months or more. It's definitely worth going and getting some functional labs. What I mean by that is that could look like something like a GI map, a complete microbiome mapping, because that can sort of have a look at things like because it's a stool analysis. So they can sort of have a look and see, under the scope, of course, whether there's, undigested food particles, and that can be like a malabsorption, or, they look at pancreatic enzyme levels. They'll look at, levels of good bacteria. They look at levels of bad bacteria. They look at potential, is there a yeast overgrowth or candida? Is there parasites present? Worms, all those sort of things. So it's definitely worth looking at that. I know for myself, the first time I had one of those complete microbiome mappings, I've had a few done over the years, it was like, oh my gosh, I had blastocystis, so, cryptosporidium, there was all these sort of things, present. I was like, oh my gosh, And, you know, that's not great because you want to make sure you're absorbing things properly and properly being nourished. And as I said, now that we can see that there is that link between, you know, a lot of health conditions or a exacerbation of health conditions and the gut and leaky gut, you know, and gut dysfunction. So these labs, the other second one is food sensitivity ones like a IgG, because you can get that done, work out what your body is sort of sensitive to, get off it. And I mean, you know, it can be quite interesting. The more leaky your gut is, the more foods you'll be reactive to. Ideally, you know, they'll have the different gradings. And sorry, I'm getting a call here from the US. I'm just going to decline that because I don't know anyone in New Jersey. So, sorry. Yeah, so, you know, you get off those foods and let your body start healing, basically. It's different from an IG. Oh, goodness, this person really wants me, don't they? Yeah, so anyway, they'll leave a message if it's important. But, you know, it's a really good idea. And as I said, it's interesting what the body reacts to. Like some of the things I was reacting to, it was a real shame, actually. It was things like, I don't know, salmon, you know, because I think I'd overdone it over the years with salmon. Blueberries, once again, I think I'd overdone it. So it's not always foods that you think. And even more recently, when I did it last year, it was because I'd sort of got rid of gluten. So I was having, you know, more like, you know, almond meal, and I was using, you know, like say, I don't know, coconut flour, and I was using buckwheat and things like that. So I was really highly reactive to buckwheat and stuff like that. It's like my body had been like, eek, way too much. So yeah, you know, not ideal. So I would recommend those tests, something like that, if you've got a chronic issue. Next one is, you know, related, you can do food eliminations with a practitioner. So you generally would do it over, say, you know, 3-week period or something like that. And, you know, there's common things that people are sensitive to, common food intolerances. We're not talking about the full-on IgE, food allergies, anaphylaxis thing here. Not at all. This has nothing to do with that. This is more intolerances and sensitivities. So, but this could be, you know, generally things like lactose. So, you know, the sugar that's in like dairy and things like that. Casein, which is like the protein in dairy and it's in other foods too. Gluten. Salicylates, you know, sulfates, FODMAPs, things like that. So, you know, it differs for people, and that can really be useful as well. Which brings me on to my next one, good old FODMAPs. FODMAPs is huge, and it's a real problem for me. And it's one of those things I could probably tolerate a little bit. It's the same with histamine. It's like I can tolerate a little bit of foods that contain histamine. I go over that threshold, and it's different for everyone, I will pay for it. So the FODMAPs, these fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, you've got the sugar alcohols, you've got polyols, you know, things like that. And this is interesting because, you know, with this, it was, I believe this dietitian, I think it was Sue Shepherd down in Victoria, like I think she was at Monash University or something. Anyway, this is huge, as I said, particularly for people with chronic issues, but especially when there's like bloating or gas or IBS, you know, irritable bowel syndrome. And it's one of those things, as I said, like it's where there's an excess generally, or you want to avoid it. So, you know, earlier in the week, I'd had some rye. And, you know, rye is one of those things that, you know, definitely didn't react with me. So it's higher in fructans, which is one of in the FODMAPs, you know, groups that you're best to try and minimize or avoid. So I'd had some rye. I believe I'd also had, I'm just trying to think what else I'd eaten that day. Maybe a nectarine. I might have had some yogurt. But anyway, my body had obviously had too much. I had crippling wind pain. I kid you not. I was using essential oils. So there's this blend that's quite good for the digestive system. I was putting that topically over there. I was drinking Iberogast, which is a great little herbal registered product that you could try. It's quite safe even for very young ones. Anyway, yeah, gosh, it was, and that the next night was the same, and I was really trying to rack my brain on what I'd been eating, and that's what I think it was. I'd overdone the limit, especially the rye for me. So other things are, like even fruits and such as apples and mangoes, corn syrup, sometimes that's in things, honey even. But even things like, as I said, milk, certain cheeses, asparagus, beetroot, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, fennel, which I love, garlic, onions, which, onions are great, let's face it, they're so versatile. Things like that. And also you've got to watch out for like chewing gum. Chewing gum's often got, it could have xylitol in it. It could have one of the other sugar alcohols. And I find that sometimes there might be a protein bar or something when I've had those in the past. If I have more than a tiny bit, I start feeling that same, it's almost like that wind pain. It just feels like that bloating. You just think, oh my gosh, like it's painful. So that, you've got to be cautious of that. So there's also different sources. This Sue Shepherd, she's actually come out with her range of products that you can get in Woolworths and Coles, I think. But she has different mixes that and recipes that accompany it that are kind of low FOD maps. So, there's definitely fruits and things like, kiwi fruit and blueberries, they're all kind of lower. Also, there's oat milks and, certain cheeses and lactose-free yogurts and, there's lots of different bok choys and carrots and, ginger, green beans, lettuces, all that sort of stuff, and rice and oats. So there's a lot of different things that isn't considered, high in FODMAPs, but as I said, there's definitely a threshold thing. Next thing, and I know I'm talking for a long time here, but manage stress. It's paramount. I know, like I always talk about this, but honestly, we know that when you're stressed, as I said, it affects your gut. Like, you're in fight or flight. The body doesn't think that, you need to be eating because it needs that precious energy to fight or flee. So, it shuts down your digestive system. So try not to eat when stressed. Consider things like, breath work and meditation. EFT has been so valuable to me. Journaling, this grounding, walking in nature, mindfulness. There's so many things you can do to help. And of course, there's various nutrients and herbs that can help you along the way. Next thing is in terms of supplements, enzymes can be really useful for people, especially blood type A's, because we don't have a lot of acid and enzymes. It's just, something that I found, something that's Ped Diamo, who put out the blood typing diet. He'd noticed with all the people that he'd seen with the different blood types. But, they can be really useful for people, especially where there's like bloating and gas and even sometimes, reflux and things. So, but you've got to work, as I said, with a practitioner because, it's one of those things, you don't want to be increasing the acid or increasing enzymes if you're taking some sort of proton pump inhibitor like a Nexium or a Somac or a Losac, because it's like you just, 1 minute trying to up the enzymes and up your acid so you can break food down, and the next minute you're trying to suppress it. So you've got to work with a practitioner who knows what they're doing. But, definitely, as I said, enzymes can be useful provided there's no ulcers or, as I said, meds that are going to suppress it. Also, things like, as I said, I quite like Iberogast. I always keep it here. Some people find it's nice to have some slippery elm on hand or some aloe vera juice, or, as there's so many different mixes that you can consider. And there's really nice products that are out there to help heal the gut. And, these have things in them like, glutamine, which we know is like a fuel for the intestinal cells, and they might have particular sorts of zinc formats in there and things like that. And then you've got, of course, probiotics, you've got prebiotics, and they're getting quite sophisticated in their ability to identify, okay, this particular strain helps with anxiety, this particular strain helps to balance the immune system, where there's autoimmune conditions because some are more heightened, this particular one helps increase immune function. So this, psychobiotics, which is good for helping with mental health. So there's different strains for different conditions, and, so it's definitely worth exploring all of that. So anyway, hopefully I haven't spoken too long. Who knows how long I've spoken, but I could go on forever with this. It's something I could really talk about for a long time. And also think about the fact that, this is just coming through, your solar plexus. When we talk about the chakras, the energy vortexes, when you think about the chakras that are kind of in that digestive system area, you've got the solar plexus. The solar plexus, it's to do with really lots of things, but your worth, your self-worth. It's to do with your power, your strength. It's to do with your tribe, your community, feeling a sense of belonging and self-acceptance and acceptance from others. So that's worth considering too. That could there potentially be an imbalance there? And yeah, so as I said, it's just something else to think about. So see if that serves you, see what works for you, and discuss with your healthcare practitioner. So much love, and see you tomorrow for day 14. Bye.